your background, and what got you to this point.
My name is Bill Zahller from Nashville, North Carolina. Professionally, started out as a pilot for over 2 decades, flying, and then 15 years ago got into single-family homes. Did the out in Scottsdale, Phoenix area, Idaho. Enjoyed that, learned a lot from it, and decided I wanted to scale up a few years back and got into multifamily. Found a group that was good to work with, Joe, and learned a lot. My business partner and I just closed, like I said, in September on 216 units in Atlanta, Georgia.
So my name is Julie Lamb, and I'm from San Francisco, California, and I started investing in real estate in 2009, and was just kind of doing the traditional narrative of get married and buy a home. And in 2014 and 2016, we were looking to exit a couple of our properties in the Bay Area, and I started to look at multifamily. I was thinking that that would be the best way to kind of scale and grow my wealth. And that was around the time when I met Joe, and we started talking about getting into multifamily together. And I started out first as a passive investor, and it was really such a great way for me to learn about multifamily deals and how they worked by being a passive investor first. Sort of decrease the risk while you're getting paid to learn, essentially, is what it was. And then in 2018, I came here to the Best Ever Conference and met my business partner, Annie. And over the last year, we co-founded Goodegg Investments, and we've done about 11 deals together in the last year or so.
Awesome. So Henry Lai, again, out of New York. I've developed my career in the healthcare industry. I have played many different roles. I've been in marketing, finance, and operations. Most recently, I'm in corporate strategy, and I help evaluate business opportunities and deals, but for a large company. And I've always been interested in real estate. I started going to a lot of RIAs and a lot of meetups, and just talking to people about what they're doing, whether it's wholesaling or fixing and flipping. And I started talking to some folks who did multifamily, and that's where it really piqued my interest. I started first looking at 3 and 4 unit multifamilies. I couldn't really make the numbers work out of New York and New Jersey. I think the best deal that I found was about 2% or so cash on cash return. In any case, in coming to these conferences, like this Best Ever conference, I started meeting a lot of people, and what I realized was, in order to put together like a syndication for multifamily, all the stars needed to align, right? Like I needed to, develop my relationships with the brokers and the owners, find somebody who'll sign off on the loan, determine whether or not I could equity raise and people would actually believe in me to put in money for a deal, and maybe find a property management company, and it was just a lot. And I think what really helped me get to that next step was partnerships. And I first started also with passive investing. Then I started getting into the equity raise. I've done that now for 4 deals, as Joe has mentioned. And for my most recent deal, I got more and more deeper into the different parts of the deal, which I quite enjoyed. But anyway, I would say that my background in kind of the corporate world has really translated into the skills that I can use here in evaluating deals. I think I'm quite comfortable with the numbers. I'm quite comfortable with building relationships, and yeah, so here I am today.
Wonderful. So my name is, depending on which part of my life you know me from, pre-Joe Fairless days, it used to be Ike Mutabanna.
I knew you as Joe.
And that's why he knows me. That's why he knows me. But then once I got into real estate, I became better known as Ike, and I'm comfortable however you want to call me. If you can pronounce it wrong, great. If you can't, Ike is fine. But my background is in technology. I worked for about 20 years. I used to live in Boston, and through various different companies and roles, I was in the startup industry to a large extent. My final job was as a chief technology officer in a market research firm. And I really fell into real estate completely accidentally. So I'm going to give a shout out, and hopefully Holly Williams is right here. I don't know if she's,
You'll know that she is.
That's right. But she and Joe are great friends, and she used to be the head of sales in the company where I was the CTO. And in many of our sales calls, she would be yapping away about Joe and about multifamily all the time. I had no idea what she was talking about. But it just became an interesting thing after a while. It grew on me, decided to passively invest with Joe. And then at some point I realized that I was developing an interest in it. So about a year and a half, maybe ago, a little more than that, I decided to jump into it full time. Since then I've done about 10 deals. And I know Joe rattled off the statistics, which I can't remember right now. But done deals both in terms of partnering with people and bringing in investors and helping to really put those pieces together to create value across different sides of the equation. So, in short, that is where I come from.
So let's talk about a specific project. Henry, let's start with you. Talk to us about a specific project you've worked on and you've developed partnerships, used your skill set, and what was your role versus your partner's role?
Okay. Well, first off, I would say that I had to figure out where I could add the most value. Right? And being out in New York City and not having construction or fix and flip background or renovations, I knew I couldn't do the asset management. I had started kind of reaching out to folks, the brokers and the owners to try to do acquisitions, but that was really difficult because I wasn't in the target markets. So I thought, all right, well maybe I could start with the equity raise. And in doing so, for my first raise, I raised commitments of $750K. For the second raise, I raised like $1 million in 2 days. I think that I primed the pump and talking with a lot of investors for that first deal. And then, I had just gone to a conference like one of these. But actually, first I have to say, there's no conference like one of these. Like this really is the best conference I've been to. So thank you so much, Joe and Ben, for organizing this. Like I've talked to a lot of people out here, and there's just so many things about it. One, the quality of the people. Second, the organization. I feel like everything is more or less on schedule. The fact that the food is really great, and that it's here, right? Because usually the conferences that we go to, I think we have to like gather up like 3 or 4 people and go to a restaurant, and there's just a lot more networking opportunities to be able to eat lunch here and breakfast here. And this is one of the few conferences where I actually want to be in this room and listening to the speakers, whereas most of the time for the other conferences, I'm outside and just networking the whole time. So, cheers to you. Like this is a
Because everyone
really
here
great.
is
I really enjoyed it and gotten so much value out of it. So specifically, what I was going to talk about was I had met these partners through another conference. It was in Boston. And,
Which one?
It was the Ultimate Partnering.
Dave Lindahl. Okay.
And it was kind of like dating. I talked to a lot of people, that day, but I really hit it off with, the head of this one group out in Houston. And I think we talked for like an hour and a half straight. Then, I went off and talked with some other people that, we met again at the bar. And then he introduced me, to the rest of his team. And I didn't know at that point, right, that we had actually partnered up. We just started talking more and more, and we thought, wow, we're really getting along. So, I flew out there to Houston, saw their operations, saw that, they had organized their own partnering event, and I was impressed. And I also, toured some of their properties. And anyway, in a series of discussions, right, and this didn't happen very quickly. I think, we were on many, many teleconferences. Luckily, I got into kind of the beginning part of their next deal so that I was able to really go line by line through their underwriting and influence it and say, no, I really think that the numbers support us being a bit more conservative. I think, we should increase the cap rate here, the exit cap rate. I think that, we can support giving monthly distributions. And, from the point of view of an investor, this is how I would pitch it, to our investors. This is what I think would be most attractive to them. So, it was a 96-unit deal. 5.9 million. So we got it about 61,750 in the Pasadena area of Houston. I think we got a really great deal on it. We closed on December 20th. And yeah, and so
How much
far,
you raise?
it was about 1.7. And you know, I raised about 900K for that. So
You raised 900.
right out of that amount. And it's, you know, it's been a great relationship, and you know, we're now in talks about our next deals. And what I'm really excited about is, you know, I like the fact that I can be more like getting into the acquisition portion of it, as well as getting closer and closer to the asset management. I told them, you know, my goal is really to see a deal through from beginning to end, and you know, start getting more and more of a vote with our, you know, controlling interest. But what I really appreciated was finding partners that were very adaptive, and you know, they would listen to my feedback and actually change the business plan according to my advice and you know what you know my experience with my investors have been.
So real quick, a couple follow-up questions, and we'll move on. One, the 750,000 you raised initially for your first deal. How many people was that, and how did you know those individuals?
I don't remember how many people.
Was there
I'd
one
say
person that brought 600 of it, or was it broken out by like 100K?
I think one person might have brought 250, but I think the rest were individuals. I mean, just you know, single people. For how I knew them, right? I think this was the first time that I had raised equity, and the way I went about it is I did a self-assessment, and I said, you know, it would really help me out if you guys gave me some feedback on me, you know, based on your experiences with me throughout my life, whether, you know, I met you in elementary school or high school or, you know, through work. And, you know, I'd really like to know what you think are my strengths and what you think are things that I can improve upon. And in doing so, you know, I reached out to people that I hadn't talked to for over 10 years. And of course, after that, you know, I thanked them because many people were very willing to help and, you know, give me their feedback. And then I said, so, you know, what are you doing nowadays? And that's when I started talking to them about the deal and saying, you know, now I'm in real estate. This is what I'm doing. This is the value that I bring, and that's how I raised for my first deal.
And then the second quick follow-up question: the 96 unit.
Yeah.
On the general partnership side, how much ownership do you get for doing what you did?
So you know, we negotiated that, and what we had decided on was that if you brought 100% of the private equity, then you would get 50% of the GP. So I got, you know, my percentage based on the 900 divided by 1.7.
And
So
then
that-
all the fees are split based on percent ownership?
Correct.
Got it. Cool. Julie, you mentioned that you started off as an LP. Do you recommend others starting off as an LP, limited partner, and passively investing in a deal, and then do active things? And if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the way that I got into it, like I mentioned earlier. And it was, you know, when I first looked at getting into multifamily, there's like so many different things you have to do, right, in a deal and taking down a deal. And I kind of got overwhelmed by that process. And so when I learned of the opportunity, which I actually didn't even know there was the opportunity to be an LP, I naively emailed Joe on Bigger Pockets and asked him if he wanted to partner with me on a deal. And he had asked me if I wanted to be active or passive, and I didn't even know that there was, you know, an opportunity to be passive. And I said, well, active if you need me to be. I don't know, if you need me to go down and talk with vendors, I can do that. I didn't really know. And I said, you know, if there's an opportunity to be passive, I'd love to learn more about that, right? Because at the time I was working, I have 3 young kids, and I was working a full-time job, and I'm trying to do this, you know, real estate as a side hustle. And so it was, you know, I was like, yes, talk to me more about that. And the returns, right, were great. I mean, I was looking at smaller multis in the Bay Area, and I was lucky if I was going to get 3 to 5% cash-on-cash returns on those properties in the Bay Area. And Joe over here was talking about giving me 8 to 10% as a passive for doing nothing. And so, I got into that, and I thought, what a great way to learn about how the deals work and de-risk, my investment while I'm earning a great return, but I get to be a part of the deal and learn about how the deal works without putting my money at risk for if I was to go out and buy my own deal, in the Bay Area, I don't know what I'm doing, So I think there's certainly something to be said for, leveraging the knowledge, right, of other people who have done this before me. And sharing in the return, which is everything that we do as far as how partnerships work, especially in the syndication space.
And you mentioned that you met your partner at this conference last year. How do you structure that partnership?
Yeah, so it's not like we met each other and it was like she is in real estate and I'm in real estate and we just thought about a partnership. It kind of happened by accident. We were at a work session. We left this conference and we weren't talking about necessarily partnering up, but we left this conference and we did a work session together. And I was raising for my third deal at that point, and we were talking about all the work we were having to do. And she was just starting her syndication business, and she was talking about, wanting to do a lot of blog posts and videos, and she loves doing that. And I was like, that's like the part that I really do not want to do, but I know it's something that I have to do in order to decrease the amount of time when I talk with my investors, right? So it was like something I knew I had to do. And then on the back end, she had said that she didn't like necessarily doing the investor relations calls, that she felt like, she's like, I think if someone talked with you, that they would be able, that they would be more interested than if they talked to me. And so it kind of happened, by accident, where we realized that, my strengths were her weaknesses and vice versa. And I think that's such an important piece, to any good partnership. That paired together with the fact that if you have, a shared vision and a mission, which we definitely did, and I think we discovered that here at the conference, that being mothers and, trying to use real estate as a way to, get out of our W-2. And so that was something that I think is super important, not just finding someone who balances your strengths and weaknesses, but making sure that the mission is always, very much in alignment. Because at the end of the day, I know that whatever she's doing for the business is very much, going towards the same mission for me as well. So,
what were you professionally before real estate?
I worked in the legal field.
Legal field.
Yeah.
How did you transition the perception from you being in the legal field to now in real estate when you're speaking to people about an opportunity that you're raising money for?
I think that's a good question. A lot of it is, when I worked in the law firm, a lot of it was dealing with a lot of attorneys. And so a lot of it is understanding the needs of very busy people, right? And so as I work with high net worth investors, a lot of it is trying to understand what their needs are and what's important to them. And so I think a lot of the skill sets that I learned in my legal career translates over very nicely into being on the investor relations side and working with investors and folks who are very busy, and understanding how to structure my calls to get them where they're trying to go in the shortest amount of time possible. So,
And I hear you on that. As a follow-up, what I came across is, I'm previously working at advertising agencies, and then if I would have shared immediately thereafter, leaving the advertising agency, an opportunity to invest, I'm like, wait, what? What are you doing?
right.
So you the skill sets you learned were applicable, but what about the conversation where it's like, wait, Julie, you're showing me what? Like, I
Yeah.
thought you were in legal.
Yeah.
What's going on? How did you bridge that gap?
So, I guess really it was the conversations I had about my experience as an LP.
Okay.
And so that was really, and again, that goes back to why is it a good idea to be an LP first? So when I started, pitching deals to folks, it was from the perspective of, hey, I've done this before you and I was in your shoes, and here are all the things that I looked at as a passive investor and the things that were important to me. And so, yeah, that was kind of how I made that transition. Yeah.
Bill? Bill cracks me up. He's a funny guy.
Obviously.
You purchased a 216 unit deal. Talk to us about the partnerships there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just piggyback what Rail's saying. It's definitely a partnership, relationship business. I believe more than anything. But
I already turned you off.
I know usually early. Absolutely. We partner on this deal. 260, my business partner, Richard Boyne, there in the front row with Park Capital Properties, our partners. And we partnered up, went down and found through broker relationships, we found that we were actually looking at another deal in Atlanta. Just happened to drive by this one we saw come in the inbox a couple days earlier. Drove by and from a previous meeting we had with the brokerage house down in Atlanta. We recognized the broker, saw him, sent him a text. He was actually on another tour, had lunch, came back. He showed us the property, found there was an opportunity to preempt the call for offers. So we went home, ran our numbers, made sense, put the offer in, and we were able to short circuit the process that way as far as finding the deal.
What did you purchase prior to that 216 unit?
The largest
Yes.
single family had about 10 single family homes, probably 5 to 6 years earlier.
And when you make an offer prior to the official call for offers, there could be a thought process that you're negotiating against yourself, and why do that if they're going to go for a call for offers already? In this case, that did not happen. So did you consider the pros and cons there? Did something lead you to the direction which ended up being the correct direction? But some people might not do that because they don't want to set the bar high already, and then there's already, they're going to market with the deal anyway.
Right, absolutely. We had a good relationship with the broker, so we had some trust there, but mainly it was the number they were saying that they would take a direct offer for. It made sense to us. All our numbers worked at that price. So if it worked at that price and we hit all our goals, that we decided it's good. There was also conditions of hard money day one was initially in the LOI, which as it turned out, they actually didn't insist on that with the contract, which we were surprised. We tried to build them some space because there was $100,000 hard day one, and we built in like 15 days and negotiated for an LOI contract to get the property condition report back to see where we actually had first. And as it actually made it through contract, the seller dropped the requirement for $100,000 hard. So
Why?
I don't know, never asked. It didn't show up in the contract, and we didn't point it out. So
Yeah.
we were happy to go with that.
And then during, we'll stick to the due diligence stage, and then we'll get into more on the macro level business plan. But during the due diligence stage, how much equity was required for that deal?
About 2.9.
2.9 million. How much had you raised prior to this deal?
0.
Zero. Okay. So 0, 2.9. Fill in the gap, please.
Right. That was initially there was some pushback to your earlier point about people that had known me for 20 plus years of my career, knew me as a pilot versus a syndicator.
Did you have a full-time job?
I do.
As a pilot?
Exactly. Yeah. So there was, they're not quite, the people I've met on the outside through blog, meetup groups, our Asheville Multifamily Investor Club, all the things we do on the real estate side, they know each other. The people I've worked with had long relationships with at work as a pilot. There was kind of some resistance there. So it was going a little slower than we anticipated initially of my list of all the people, but we were having some success, and we solved that problem. We partnered up with Grow Capitalists to help raise for this deal, and they probably raised probably 8% of the equity, 75% of the equity raised through their network.
And how do you structure that on the GP side?
On the GP side, so Neil and his team are around, as it worked out, around 26%, I think, and Rich and I are 27 and a quarter each on that. And then we also had key principal. We had Mark Kinney from the Molly family, who's our KP on the deal. So he had a 10% stake, and then we also had a 6% for the equity guarantee. For the loan.
Right.
Yeah.
The loan guarantor.
Exactly right.
So a lot of different partners. How did you know where to go and who to? Let me start. What gave you the comfort level to bring each of these individuals into the partnership?
Right. And it was as some of it unfolded, it was kind of interesting. Our original key principal covered several roles. He had 5,000 units or so under management, been doing it a decade or so, very successful. And he also had the net worth, we need $15 million net worth for the loan requirement. He brought all that. 2 weeks before closing, he backed out of the deal. So
Why?
We don't know for sure. He wasn't somebody we just met. We've known him for several years. He's local to our area. They had lots going on, to be fair. We'll say they had 800 units they were closing on, I think, in Nashville at the time. Maybe that was a distraction. For whatever reason, he backed out 2 weeks prior. And at that point, we'd had $200,000 hard.
How much of your own money?
That was at 200,000 hard. Oh, 100 of mine, 100 Richards, yeah.
So you had 100K at risk,
Right.
and your business partner had 100K at risk.
Right.
And you've got 2 weeks to close.
Right.
And
Other
the
than that,
only other partner that you two had was this person, and he backed out.
Exactly.
And so all those other individuals earlier you mentioned, there's like 4 individuals, they came within a 2-week period of time?
Yes, close. Neil, I met him at a conference in Atlanta, probably 2 weeks prior. And we've been talking about raising money at that point, partnering. And he had just came on board maybe 3 days before that. Solved the equity raise problem. You know, it's like
Whack-a-mole, right?
Yeah. So one problem solved, one pops up. So yeah, at that point, we knew it was a good deal. We knew we had the equity for the deal. We'd underwritten it, I think, 6 times. 6 different people underwritten through the mortgage broker, myself, Richard. I always paid a guy that professionally underwrite it for the full time to make sure all our numbers were what we thought they were. So we knew it was a good deal. We had money hard, and it was just, you know, go back to, like I said, it's a relationship business. So it's who I've met over the last several years of building that out. Went through, we found the guys we thought would make good partners for us, reached out to several of them. People had different things going on at the time. Mark stepped up, and we're glad. We have a better team now for it. So we're glad it worked out the way it did.
And so business plan, what's the business plan for the property?
Right, there's a value add strategy on that. It's 1972, 260 units, like I said. Our neighboring property, the borders us to just to the east. It's 1 unit, we're 200 hours higher than ours renovated, and the 3 bedroom, 450 dollars higher. So we thought we had some price we could go in there. We could raise ours, renovate the units. Even if we came in $100 on the gap, it was still, we could be the low cost provider and still hit all our performance numbers, which still was running 18% IRR. And even the purchase, we paid $58 a door for it. The local market there, 3 years older, property we looked at sold for $73 a door. So we felt comfortable with the buying price and also what our strategy was going forward with value add.
How are you able to, last question, and we'll go to Paul. How are you able to do, or how do you structure your time so that you're able to do this while also having a full-time job?
Through partnerships also. Like I said, I usually work 7 days on, 7 days off. So I have an entire week to devote to at home. The other part I can also do on the road, your laptop, your phone calls you can make. Richards works from home also in his business, so he's on the ground also all the time.
Richard, your business partner has a full-time job as well?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're in the same, somebody mentioned about the commonality of goals. And, you know, the same thing, we're both working for, you know, like a 2-year or 3-year exit from our current jobs to do full-time syndication, so we're hoping to scale and grow that way. So it's alignment of interests, goals, work ethics, I think are very important in the partner you find.
And how'd you meet Richard?
Local creative group there, yeah, a couple, 2.5 years ago.
Got it. Iqbal, tell us about a deal that you've done recently through a partnership.
Yeah, sure. So the one deal that I think I can talk about is probably the smallest deal that I've been part of. A deal in North Carolina, in a market called Lexington, which is probably midway between Charlotte and Winston-Salem area. And every one of these deals that I've done has come about through partnerships that I've developed over time. But also, you know, there's some factor that causes those partners to come together. In this particular case, what happened was this individual who brought the deal, he and I got to know each other, and I knew that he was scouting that North Carolina area and looking for a deal for some time. And you know, we used to talk. I used to help him with analysis. He would run his underwriting by me. So we sort of got comfortable to the point where we knew that, you know, potentially there's a way, you know, we could actually work together. When the deal actually happened, it was such a small deal, 62 units, $3 million, that, you know, I encouraged him to just do it on by himself.
$3 million purchase price.
$3 million purchase price, exactly.
What was the raise? Equity raise?
The raise was going to be $800,000.
800K. Okay.
So I'm like, I think, because it was Mike, I said, Mike, you can handle this yourself. It's a really small deal. I'm going to be there to help you out, advise you in whatever way I can. Take care of it. What he ended up doing was he underestimated what it would take to actually raise that 800,000. And he focused all of his energies on the due diligence. He focused his energies on making sure all his assumptions were right and all of that stuff. About a week and a half prior to closing, he had raised 300K. And that time he calls me in panic. Says, I'm stuck. I've got a week and a half left for closing. He'd already taken an extension from the seller, so he was in no position to actually extend again. And that he had done for the loan that he was trying to get. So, help, it was a help cry. Now, fortunately, I knew that deal because I had sort of helped him with the underwriting and helped him analyze stuff. So it wasn't that I didn't know the deal, but a week and a half prior was an impossible task. Not impossible, let me not say impossible, but the problem was that it was a new market for me and my investors, right? My investors were familiar with Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, the major metros. They were not so familiar with North Carolina, so I had not gone through the process of educating them on that market and on this kind of deal. So what I did was I basically ran through my investor list, looked at the most likely people who, based on the conversations I'd had over time and what their objectives were, I knew there were a couple who were looking to invest in a deal where they could take on a larger equity position. Not just from a passive investment, but also an active role as well. Now, they were not clear. They were already businessmen. They were not looking for actually getting involved in the day-to-day. They just wanted to feel that they had some kind of a control in terms of influencing the direction of how things go along the deal, right? So I contacted them. Fortuitously, one of them had 500K exactly sitting in a 1031. Problem was, Mike had already got the deal under a syndication structure. He had a 506C that he was doing.
506C?
506C, which was even worse, right? And that's what made it even tougher. Because his lawyer told him, get out there, do that, you can service it, 800,000 will happen. Not a big deal. So, it clearly also tells you that there's things that, you can overlook in your process, which you learn from as you go along. Well, one thing led to another. I talked to this investor who was very interested. He was staying in Seattle. So he's like, look, I'm not going to come down there and manage the property, but I want to be involved, right? As I said, semi-active kind of thing. Problem was, he couldn't do the 1031. He was running out of his own, he had 15 days left for a 45-day mark to identify the property. So what we did was, it was all just really crazy. He loaned us 500K so that we could close the deal. And then once we closed the fund, we went through the process of redeeming that into a tenanted common, so he could then push the money out of his 1031 into that property and get title on it. So
Very
creative structure. Fortuitously, these pieces came together at the last minute. The lender almost threw a fit, about the whole thing because it was essentially a loan, and they expected us to actually bring equity to the table. But Mike had his high net worth investor who was going to be his loan guarantor, had a really strong relation with the lender, convinced them to overlook that and get it through. But yeah, it worked out eventually.
You said Mike is his name? Mike? Okay. So you had never done a partnership with Mike?
No, I
never
haven't.
partnered with him. And he had a week and a half to go? Or would you say week? And he had raised 300 of the 800 and 800? And so he called you in a panic, right?
Right.
You've never partnered with him.
Uh-huh.
He's about to close, or supposed to close. He's calling you in a panic. I imagine there's some part of you that's like, well, if he's not paying it, if he's had blinders on to this point on a very important component of a deal, are there other things that he's perhaps missing because he's got tunnel vision in whatever he's been focused on? So that doesn't give me the confidence to then partner up with him and bring my investors in. But you reconcile that clearly. So how did you think about that?
So great point, by the way. So a few things that I think helped me through that process. Number one was despite the specific situation with that deal, I had built a relationship with him.
How'd you originally meet him?
Met him at a conference.
Which one, do you remember?
I can't remember now. It was in March of last year.
Okay.
A small one, not one of these major kind of conferences. It was a smaller one. And we met in Dallas, in fact. He had come down to Dallas for that. So I got to know him and developed sort of a trust relationship in him as a person in terms of his values, ethics, his philosophy of what he was trying to achieve for himself and his investors. So I think there was an alignment on those sides, right? And as far as the deal specifics are concerned, because of the fact that I had been involved sufficiently to understand what the deal was about, I had a reasonable amount of confidence that it was a good deal at the end of the day. Where I had to overcome, and then we call it the next leap, so a leap of faith that I had to take was, and I think I had to do that for every deal I've been in where I've worked with someone for the first time. And Henry spoke about his first time with the group in Houston. So there was a bit of a leap of faith there, but I think what made it more reasonable was because of two things. Number one was this investor who came in is a very good friend of mine. I have a very good relation with him. And because he took on the position of a semi-active role in the general partnership, he also has a strong voting rights on the general partnership side, which allows him to then influence the way the deal is managed, right? And because of my relationship with him, and they brought me on as a general partner as well in an advisory capacity for having helped with the deal together, that meant that I had a level of influence as well on how the deal is managed. So I think with this, the risks sort of got lower where Mike still does the day-to-day management of the ground, but we have a very good control and relationship we've developed since then on operating it in a manner where we're collaboratively doing it, and we can make sure that we're factoring in whatever may be an issue there.
I think we got some time for some audience questions. I want to make sure, I'm sure we, yep, got one. You can just shout.
Ted Juria from Honolulu. I'm just wondering, specifically for Henry and Julie, during that first equity raise, when you were going over to your connections.
It works now. Yeah.
When you were going over to your network and raising equity for that first deal, either Henry in GP capacity and the LP. Was that something that you used a real estate attorney for and put together an official PPM?
Well, I mean, I think the lead sponsors, right, of the deal already had that put in place. So I didn't have to do it myself, right? And as I mentioned, it depends on which stage of the deal you enter into. Right? For my Houston deal, I was able to enter in much earlier. I think, for that first deal, I entered in later, and I think that was already set in place.
Yeah, same for me. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
You just shout until they turn on. Then you'll...
Julie, you met Annie at the conference.
Yes.
And you meet her, before you feel good about it, right? How do you go about verifying her as a partner long-term? Background checks, what you do to verify?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Will you
social
repeat the
security
question?
number.
How did you find
Oh yeah, she's just asking how I basically vetted my business partner and, did I do a background check on her or, how I vetted her. And I think that's such a great question because, you meet people all the time, right? And, a lot of it was through communication, it sounds very simple, but you can learn a lot about somebody just through having conversations with them and, how they respond to what their responses are. She had also put out a lot of content at that point, as far as like video and blog posts go, and I was blown away by her content, and so that was sort of a way that I was able to vet her in terms of the quality of the work that she was going to be putting out. But I really feel like I learned the most about her just through conversations, kind of like dating, and we really just got to know each other. And you know, there is, at some point though, you kind of do have to take a leap of faith, and you have to, you know, you can ask all the questions that you want to ask, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to make that decision on that person and say, you know, is this somebody you think you want to partner up with? But I think a lot of that just came through just communication and asking what if questions. So,
Where's Ben? What do you think, Ben? One more, we got one more. Oh, I thought you were going to the same person.
Randy Schiff, I'm from Chico, California. Have any of you thought, in doing these syndication deals, your exit strategies? Are they 1031 exchanges, and can you do that? What does it look like 5, 10 years down the road?
yeah, I mean, I think with every deal we do, the exit strategy is always to sell in 5 to 7 years. There could be a refinance that happens before then. And doing a 1031 is, yes, absolutely something that's possible on the deals that we do. And I think that that would be the ideal scenario. It's, I think, very difficult, though, to time it right so that you exit one deal and go into the next. But I think that if you can certainly do that in the deals that we do. Yeah, 1031.
I think if I can just add to that 1031s are possible, but depending on the syndication structure, there's a possibility that you might only be able to do it within the sponsoring groups syndications. So that's just one thing. It's a question to ask when you invest. It's a question to ask: that are you free with 1031 anywhere outside, or is it within the syndication groups sponsored projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think within the GP discussions, right, we often talk about the exit strategy. It depends on every deal. Sometimes you're already planning to leave a little bit early, and sometimes, you know, you plan to renovate all the units 100%. You might, you know, sell it to an institutional investor, somebody who, you know, wants a much lower risk type of property. So it depends, but we always talk about that.
Thank you for it. Really appreciate it. You get value from this? Yes. You want to? Yes? All right. Cool. Thank you guys. Thank you all. All right, guys. We're going to be back here.